Welcome back, listeners, to the Brighter Side of Blue, our worldwide podcast. Coming to you almost live from Columbo's Cafe and Tavern in Dogtown, St. Louis, home of the Thin Crust Cibo's Pizza and daily lunch specials. I'm Danny.
I'm Tommy.
I'm JJ.
Producer John.
Producer John in the house. Today is National Moonshine Day.
Yes. I felt it.
You did feel it, did you?
Yeah.
It's also National Ketchup Day, so which do you want to go with?
Moonshine.
Moonshine. It's an illegal, made in the mountains, goat piss alcohol.
Hey, we had when I go to Alabama every year, one of my cousin's friends brought, this is a long time ago, bought some moonshine. It was in a mason jar, a couple of them.
And
he got so drunk we lost him. We didn't know where we went. And then we found out he fell.
What, he become invisible?
No, we didn't know where he went. He was drunk. He was drunk.
how did it taste? Is it just
It
nasty?
was hard. But we found him. He was passed out. He fell off his bed in between the wall. And he finally woke up. We're like, where the hell were you?
That's a pretty good search. He was in the house, just between the bed.
I mean, but this is
They really cared about him.
Right.
well. It was
missed
up,
him.
if,
Took
you
3
saw
days.
if you saw the house
For
we just-
3 days.
yeah. No, we only lost him
I
for
would
a
hope
couple hours.
Don't
but-
check by the bed.
Yeah,
But it's-
don't check in the house by the bed.
No.
Start at
we
his
weren't sure
last
why we'd
known
be-
location, JJ.
All right. Well,
That
we
is
didn't.
true.
Be honest, we didn't really look for him very hard. We found out we didn't look for him at all, and just said, "Where were you?" He goes, "I fell off. I fell off the bed. I was in between the things." So.
Truth
Where's Jethro? I don't know.
Tommy, have you ever tried moonshine?
I have not.
No.
Yeah, I
Not the night.
Producer John?
It's terrible.
It
I
is
have.
terrible.
I have.
We get
What's
drunk.
National Moonshine Day?
I've tried a lot of other shit though.
And ketchup day. Yeah, I know. I'm not a ketchup guy. I'm a mustard guy, so I'll wait for the National Mustard Day.
Yeah.
But
What
we'll see.
food? What food will you never try and have never tried?
Sushi.
Oh no, I've tried sushi. No, those little balls. Those
That's good.
no, those little vegetable balls that the people fry.
Vegetable
Brussels
balls.
sprouts?
Brussels sprouts.
I'm with.
Out.
I'm,
Out.
I've never. I'm,
There's no
I'm with-
excuse for those things.
I'm
But
100%
talk
with
about
you.
something more
I've never
mainstream.
tried one either. Never
Brussels
tried one.
sprouts aren't mainstream.
They shouldn't be.
What I mean,
I don't like
that a
peas.
lot of people
I
like.
hate
I don't like
peas.
peas. Can't do
I
peas.
gotta pick them out of my
Brussels sprouts.
They don't-
chicken pot pie.
One of our sponsors, Affordable Auto Credit, Tony Zanti, he loves Brussels sprouts. Gets them deep fried, and then they pour all this butter and all this stuff. And you know why they pour all that stuff on there?
Anything
Because Brussels
fried's
sprouts
good.
taste
Make
like
it
crap.
edible.
You
The
could,
only where
you could deep fry a shoe and it'd be good.
The only place I'd ever eat Brussels sprouts is here at Columbo's Cafe down here.
Why?
Dogtown.
Why?
Because you didn't mention them in the opening, so I just decided I'd work.
I
that in.
100%.
We
didn't know?
we definitely talked about
It's
it.
been a long day.
No, it has been a long day.
Yeah.
Just to let people know, we
He said he talked about the pizza.
no, he didn't. He didn't talk about shit. He went right into mustard day, or I'm sorry, ketchup day, and
I said
I
daily lunch.
I heard it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I said Cibo's pizzas and daily lunch specials.
no,
I
you
think
didn't.
yes, he did.
No, you didn't.
We're gonna have to play back the tape.
Oh,
Yeah.
But not
Hey,
tonight.
what's that commercial? Let's look in the red box.
Oh yeah. Throw the red flag.
Red flag?
redo it. But you didn't give
No,
him
no.
enough. Well, obviously you didn't give him enough love
Yeah, you
because
did.
I wasn't
It's
paying
my,
attention to
it's
you.
my normal love. Tom.
I had the special here today for lunch.
What was?
What was it?
It was a bourbon chicken skillet. It was a beautiful
That was today?
piece. Yeah. It was a beautiful
sounds good.
piece of grilled chicken on top of fried potatoes, fried onions, and corn, and it had this bourbon sauce. It was like a sweet and spicy sauce.
Wow,
It was amazing.
that
That sounds like something you get at a 5-star restaurant.
Yeah.
I'm telling you about it.
amazing.
I
I
did
started
get
coming
enough.
here.
Greg,
I could
Greg,
only
you
eat
can
half
thank
of
me later for bringing this back up.
Exactly.
Man,
but we did.
But
bring
you were
it up.
so quick that they needed more.
Yeah, that's how smooth he is.
But what? Yeah,
Smooth.
you're right. Yeah, all right. I'm with you
So,
on that.
Tommy, on this show, we had Chief Joe Spiess.
Yep. And Jerry Late. We got two today.
Colonel,
Just we had Jerry Layshock, Colonel Layshock, come on, who's been on the show before, and then we had Chief Joe Spiess from Brentwood. We invited them both to. We thought we might talk to them for like 20 minutes apiece, right? But Jerry came on first, and he had some tremendous undercover stories. Fun to listen to. Jerry's a great storyteller. And then Joe came up and we talked a little bit, and he's got some great stories too. So what we've decided to do is, you're going to hear Joe Spiess today. We're going to talk about the difference, or the evolution, I guess you would say, of using informants against
Undercovers.
And then next week we're going to do Jerry Layshock, because
It's great stories.
He's just a great storyteller, and
So I
got 2 shows out of 1.
Yeah, we got 2 shows out of 1, and I have to get this off my chest. Because it's true. But about 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about the need to get Colonel Layshock back on the show, and we were talking about JJ was busting balls about pickleball, the quote was from producer John was, Colonel Layshock wouldn't be caught dead playing pickleball. You said it. You said it. Yeah, you said it.
I defend that statement.
And I thought, maybe John's got a point. He's got insider information. Maybe Colonel Layshock won't play pickleball. So, but Tommy tells me, call Colonel Layshock and see if he'll come on the show. So I call Colonel Layshock, and he didn't answer right away. And I thought, man, that was weird. I might have messed something up. I called back, and he answered. I'm going to do an imitation. Hey, Danny, everything okay? I'm playing pickleball with these guys. I'm playing, and I just picked up the phone. I saw you call twice. I go, hey, Colonel, go back and play pickleball, and I'll call you later. And he did.
Know why?
He was on the court playing pickleball when I called him. So you owe me an apology.
He was
Right. Hey, next Monday's show has been canceled.
he was volunteering at the old folks' home.
Right.
He was on the pickleball
He
court,
was volunteering.
and he was out of breath.
Yeah.
So just so you know,
He doesn't do anything half.
it's a man sport. It's a man sport. I mean, it's a competitive sport. I didn't mean to say it's a man sport, but you can be a man playing that sport. It's everybody.
Keep trying to convince yourself of that.
I'll play you for that Michelob Ultra.
Well, we're kind of advanced. I love that commercial.
Fascinating.
No, but it's going to be great. 2 great shows.
No, and we talk a lot about good undercover stories that, those always can get a little wild, and Jerry talks about a lot of how we used to work back in the late 70s and early 80s, talks about some legends, but I don't know why we're talking about that, because that's next week. But Joe talks about a lot of the changes that we've made over the years, and some of his undercover stories from DEA, which were entertaining. And so we got, like I said, we got 2 shows out of 1. So
one of our listeners and our longtime fans is Joe Lotus, and the reason I mention his name is because he just sent me a picture. Hopefully, I'll get it to you. He stopped by Schicker Ford of St. Louis, and from Ike Bibas, he bought a black Ford F-150. And Ken Plackey was talking to me today and said he bought the best-looking F-150 on the lot. It was gorgeous. And Schicker Ford is having a special in June for our teachers and students. Go down there. Graduates.
All right.
Graduates
They're off
and
for the
teachers.
summer. Go down and buy a car.
Yep. And what do you do with the guy? I know. 15% off oil changes.
Yep.
Discount, still the employee discount. Joe Lotus got the so one of our listeners got the employee discount. So they're churning them out down there at Schicker Ford St. Louis. And
Plackey told us Saturday that they filled that lube specialist.
it's filled. It's filled. It's filled. So
Bummer. Sorry you lost out on that.
no. It was
Dan got the job.
Yeah, it was me. Yeah, no.
Hey, you know where I'm going tomorrow?
Where you going?
Where?
Dead serious. Prime Performance.
You getting a B12 shot?
I am, because I've been working these 12-hour days, and I got like 4 hours sleep last night, and pretty much that's my MO right now is 4 hours, 5 hours. So a little dragging.
You did yesterday was your 19th day.
Well, they give our rec day. We still got our rec days, but it's been 19 straight days of the 12 hours, and obviously I get 2 days. I have like 4 days off, but I'm gonna go get revived tomorrow. I think.
What time are you going?
Where are you going?
I'll call you. I don't. I'm gonna go with the one in 44 Fenton Plaza in Fenton, Missouri. I would go to the 122 Central Park in O'Fallon, Illinois, but it's a little bit more of a drive for me. But I'm serious about going
I'll go with
because
you.
I'll call you. All right.
No, actually, I text back and forth with Jim today, and I said that I think you might be seeing JJ and Danny a little bit more. I said I think they're hooked to this thing.
Don't want that.
Like I said, I'd rather just be relaxed and chill out.
I just need some energy because these
You're dragging.
12-hour days are terrible.
Yeah, well, we're gonna go. I'll go with you. Okay. Are you sitting on a good Zen over there?
I am, and it's
We've had a long show tonight. I need to hear some
Yeah,
Zen.
I've had a long
This is appropriate for like our safety thing that we talked about with how we evolved to safety and
Yep.
doing things right. A man who is alert will never get hurt. A man that is alert will never get hurt. If you think about that, it's very wise in our job, but it's also when it comes to like dating or if growing up in life. If you pay attention and you read people correctly, you won't get hurt. So Danny is looking at me like this is the worst.
I'm with
but
Danny on this one.
Let me
You have
say-
to
let me-
explain it.
Yeah, man.
But let me
I was
say
waiting
this.
for the next line.
A man that's alert will never get
will
hurt.
seldom get hurt. A man that is alert will seldom get hurt.
Well, that's different. Then.
I say never, will seldom get hurt.
Nothing's 100%, JJ.
But
Once again.
can we read it again?
That made it much more understandable.
did.
All right, sorry.
The seldom changed at all.
A man, I like never, because I'm positive. But a man who is alert will seldom get hurt, and that came from Postal Dave.
That's Postal Dave.
Sorry, Dave.
I like
JJ.
never better because that's how good I am at being alert.
You're always alert.
Pretty good.
Right on the job, you have to
Always
be
alert.
alert. Yeah, seldom. I'm sorry. Can we cut at the very beginning of that?
No, we're not.
No,
we're not.
absolutely
We
not.
are
We
going
don't
to
cut shit out.
No,
So,
okay.
John, the Brian McKenna Day was a fascinating day, and
Oh,
you
it was.
bumped into a
Absolutely.
bunch of our sponsors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It was great. I mean, almost immediately when we waded into that great crowd, and Macklin Avenue was packed.
The beautiful thing.
From as far as you could see, they had a great band playing classic rock. They played like REO Speedwagon, Riding the Storm Out, and things you don't usually hear. And everybody was in a good mood. It was just a great crowd.
great.
And we ran into Ken Plackey almost immediately, and he had like
He's with Schicker Automotive, right?
yeah, general manager. He had like 5 buckets of beer.
He kept us in beer.
So we
Immediately
stayed
became
on
his
his
best
hip
friend.
the rest of the day.
Right.
And then we ran into Dan Ponder shortly after that from Riverman Cigar.
He actually gave me a cigar.
Yep.
He did.
8984 Watson Road.
Yep.
Yep.
And we basically kind of hung out with those guys the rest of the. Well, JJ and I did. Dan Irish goodbye to us
He did. I'm not gonna lie. He did.
20
do that.
minutes in, but
All right.
JJ and I carried on the flame.
2 hours in, John. 2 hours
You
in.
stayed 2 hours?
Yeah, 2 hours.
I'm seeing
But
one.
if you're on Facebook, it's-
Affordable Auto Credit. Tony Zanti was there. We hung out with him.
Tony Zanti, yeah.
but did you see the overview, the pictures of the crowd?
Yeah.
It was unreal. And then the guy that owns the Mac said they have Macklin Days, whatever, every year. He said this crushed it.
Are you serious?
Crushed it.
I was wondering about that.
Oh, so I mean, that crowd was unreal.
I wonder,
how-
and what was a neat story is Stephanie Bosich, or Bozich, right?
Yeah, Bosich.
And she's one of Brian's best friends, and she was the main organizer of the whole thing. And Brian's favorite song was Brandy.
Brian's song.
I'm glad
That was
you're.
a
I was going
movie.
to say that.
Right.
That
Brian's
is
favorite song was Brandy. But
This is
what
weird
happened
story,
was
man.
is that everybody was asking Stephanie, "Are we going to do this every year? Are we going to do this every year?" And she didn't want to commit to it because she was like, I would imagine. I mean, from all accounts, it was such a great day that can you imagine the work that goes into that?
Yeah.
of putting it together.
It was very well
short
done.
period of time.
And she was in charge of all that. Now, she had a lot of helpers. The family and other people all chipped in and helped her out. But she didn't want to commit,
Yeah,
that day.
I can see that.
And but she walked into
Wait,
the
wait,
Grand.
stop for a second.
What's that?
She gave a speech beforehand, and she talks about, and she's made a joke about how he gave her trouble. They went to some bunch of bars one night, and she kept singing that song, Brandy. And she made a funny story about it because he gave her trouble. He goes, you can always sing that song whenever you go out, whatever. So she brought that up the day of it on their speech.
On stage
to everyone.
Right.
And the next day, you can take it from here. She goes in LeGrand's.
And then when she goes in and just buy a couple sandwiches, she was going to see Babs.
Right. It gets
Who's
Babs a sandwich.
Brian's,
Yeah.
You know, who Brian did that live show with. And when she walks in, Brandy's playing. She says, all right.
And she
I guess
actually
that's a
she
sign.
recorded.
Is she thinking about doing it now?
She
again?
recorded. They're going to
She-
do it again.
Yeah, they're doing it again now. She said that was it.
But if
That's
you-
when and she's. I'm guessing that she was probably leaning towards it anyway, and then that was probably.
But how
like the-
crazy is that?
That
She
is awesome.
talked about
Unbelievable.
singing.
That is awesome.
Loving to sing in the song Brandy, and he gave her trouble about her, or said encourage her to keep singing Brandy. That day before we got there late, so we missed that speech. And then the next day, she goes in there and hears that song over the PA of the LeGrand's deli, whatever it is, store. That is something.
Great sandwiches, by the way.
Follow
Yeah.
the signs.
That is a sign,
Follow the
man. That
signs.
is a sign.
That is pretty. It was
That
a
is
fun event.
crazy.
I'll go every year. It was a blast.
It was.
But what just listening to you guys talk, it was like a lot of you saw your current friends, but you ran into a lot of people you haven't seen in a long time.
100%. Yeah.
And those are it's always nice to run into those guys, bring a smile to your face from the old days.
What was also cool, though, Tommy, is finally JG and I kind of posted up in front of the Mac. We found a table, and people were approaching us saying, people we didn't know saying, hey, we recognize you guys from the podcast. And I just want to thank the people that came up and took the time to say hi and talk about the show with us. It felt
Yeah,
good.
that was pretty cool. That
Very
happened.
cool.
That happened a lot.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
That was an awesome story.
And so along those lines, it's funny you said that, Producer John, because I want to touch on a thing. So we are getting so many new listeners on a weekly basis, and Tommy keeps the charts. But I want to refresh everybody that what the core function of this podcast is.
Absolutely.
I don't think we say it enough.
Right.
We don't need to say it every show. But now we're hitting more countries and millions of viewers. Hey, this is a pro-police, pro-law enforcement podcast to exemplify all the great police work that happens every single day, every minute. The heroes are out there risking their lives that the news media doesn't cover. We started this because Tommy was against the defund the police movement, which we all were, but it was really aggravating you. And so this podcast was Tommy's idea.
Tell me you were against that.
Yeah, just a little bit. And,
So, just a little bit, and so we started the podcast with, hey, we're going to start a platform where we're going to be able to take the time to talk about the great police work that happens every day. And says we came up with a saying, defund these nuts.
and it's on a T-shirt.
It's on a T-shirt.
But I think I'm going to just expound on that a little bit, Danny, is that one of the things that, one of the criticisms from people that just may chime into a show, and we always title the show of who the main guest is. And then before the show, we'll do our banter. And a lot of people want to go right to that. And that's why we do a timeline now. If you want to go right to the story, go to the timeline. But one of the things we'll never stop is our banter and having fun. We will never stop that. If you don't like it, tune into another show. It's not that big of a deal to us. We're not here to make money. We're here to do what we want to do, and that's to
promote law enforcement.
and give a different perspective on
Yeah.
who people are in this profession.
Yeah.
And when we talk to people about the cases they've worked, we don't just go, exactly what happened in this case. We get into, their personalities. And it's not just, and that's one of the things we're going to keep doing. And I apologize if it
Okay, no, you explained it. And I actually went down a rabbit hole the other day because I started looking at the comments. I started reading the comments. I've been on 12-hour days, so I got time to freaking read some stuff. So I started going to some of our old podcasts and looking at the comments, and they're interesting. So if you like, subscribe, like, and share. Comment on it. We love comments, and I even if even the ones that they don't like us are
That's
funny.
funny.
Yeah.
Because I get it. I understand it.
Right. Some
I
people
mean,
are never going to like
we
us,
got
but they
thick
can.
skin.
And
I mean,
sometimes
you can make
people
fun of us.
don't understand, so we can, if you leave a comment, we can maybe clarify something that maybe upset you.
But we're not going to change. You're always going to hear our babble, and there'll always be a timeline that if you want to.
Hey, can I tell you? Can I brag about my unit again?
Absolutely.
Please.
We're going to put something out on Facebook tomorrow about them, but go ahead.
Well, we had a good arrest where we chased a guy, spiked him. It all ended up perfect. The guy had $12,000 on him, over $12,000, a bunch of crack, bunch of weed, and a bunch of pills.
And a bunch of fentanyl.
Fentanyl, I'm not correct. Fentanyl and a bag of pills like you could choke the horse with. It was a lot. It was actually a real nice gun, AR, a bunch of rounds. And two things that stuck out were there were 2 little knotted baggies with a phone number in there and 1 button of fentanyl. And what they do, I found out that's their marketing gig. They'll go down to where homeless camp is or wherever, and they'll throw the baggie to somebody, homeless person. They give them a free pill with their phone number on, so they know who to call to get their drug.
Holy cow. This is huge.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah?
And with a little weed in there too?
No, just a pill.
Just one
Heroin?
One little
one
pill,
button.
a button of fentanyl
Free.
with a phone number on
The
there.
phone number on.
Call me back.
Which is fentanyl is just the most deadly thing on earth.
Right.
That's a sick thing. That's a good story. I mean, that's going to grow legs, that story.
Think so?
Yeah.
Well, they issued all charges on the guy, so I hope this doesn't affect. This should be slam dunk.
You would think.
Because I won't say any more about it.
That's diabolical.
That's horrible. That's a horrible
diabolical.
story. I'm shocked by that.
I was impressed by their marketing.
Speaking of diabolical, have you ever? And I'll probably play the video while we're talking about this. But do you ever see the video of where the gal follows the policeman to the station and then had witnessed somebody in front of the policeman take a right without using his blinker?
Yeah.
And they get to the station, and this gal just goes off on this policeman. And she couldn't be no more crazier. She couldn't be any crazier. And the policeman kept his complete cool and absolutely trolls her with, "Hey, ma'am, can I call you an ambulance and get you some help?" And she's screaming, "Give that a ticket. Give that a ticket." Screaming at this guy. He says, "Ma'am, are you in fear, or have you thought about killing yourself in some way? Have you thought about killing yourself?"
Are you
I
a
get
threat to
help.
yourself? Yeah.
And you know how it is with crazy people. If you accuse them of being crazy, and then they get crazier.
Right.
So he was doing like a slip troll, where he's like attempting to help.
He was stirring the pot.
Tremendously. It was a tremendous move by the police officer. I was so proud of him while I was.
Why the f*** doesn't he get a ticket?
I can help you talk to somebody.
He didn't use his turn signal!
Ma'am, can I please call you an ambulance? Do you have any thoughts?
I like it. I love that.
I like that video of the cop that pulls this girl over in a nice car, and first thing she rolls down the window and she goes, "Do you know who my dad is?" And he goes, "Hasn't anybody ever told you?"
No, that's good.
Perfect way to extinguish a problem.
That is. That's pretty good. Tommy, what else we have new?
Not much. I mean, we got the Eric Lanham. I mean, this is going to come out after the release of the recent BMF, but we had Eric Lanham on earlier today with Joe and I. Talked about Stephen Henderson and a guy by the name of Julius Turntine. And this is a neat case, and Eric has been involved in all kinds of high-profile cases. The TT case, he was the
TT Jordan?
Yeah, and he was the lead detective in that, or the first seat, sat next to the U.S. attorney during the trial. And been involved in all kinds of cases. And I've nicknamed him the Dope Man Slayer from the Himalayas.
Oh, I love it.
So-
how far along are we on the BMF series? Or do you still?
We're about to wrap that motherfucker. Wrap that thing up. I thought I was going to try to stop. But I think it's funny we're going to try to wrap it up here next. But then we're going to get into other stuff with DEA and FBI and ATF. And
brought to you by JD.
And one of the things that I want to, and I didn't mention it in 2 shows that we did these undercover things with, and I'll mention it now, is that one of the all-time legend in St. Louis, and JJ, you'll remember his name, everybody will, is Mark Demas from ATF.
Oh, if we could get him on, that'd be
If we could get him on, he infiltrated the outlaws, I believe in Ohio somewhere. JJ, do you know?
Nah, I'm not sure, but he also, his last gig was with his son, who they both worked together undercover.
And if we could get him on, it would be great. But and one of the things we never covered in either one of the shows that are coming up with the undercover work is that the mental toll it plays on guys that do that every day,
Yeah.
and how that can really affect.
Well, Mark actually he went. Well, I don't want to steal his thunder, but he actually went in the penitentiary.
I'm sure he'll be able to tell the
Yeah,
story
but
better.
I'm not going to tell. I'm not going to just. I mean, he did some crazy shit.
Right.
The first time I ever saw him, he was at a Truman's. He walked in, and I'm like, "Who is this guy?" He had long ponytail. He looked like a tough son of a gun, and all the waitresses knew him. Like, and then all of a sudden I see there's DEA guys with him, and I realized he was working with DEA.
Yeah, and then we talk a little bit about the Operation Gideon that ATF did, and I'm guessing he was involved. I don't know if he was retired yet, but Mark was if we could get him on, I'm telling you that.
You think he has the same number? Because I have his old number.
I doubt it. I'm just going to throw that out there. But he still teaches at
What
the
do you do?
ATF.
Call him right now?
No, I just want to see if they have it.
That's all right.
I infiltrated.
We can wrap this up yet.
Yeah, we're ready to wrap it up. What about our communities?
They're a lot safer when they support law enforcement, Danny. Any communities that support law enforcement are always a little bit safer.
And that's the goal.
And on your way to support Fairway Automotive.
Fairway Automotive. As promised, welcome back to the brighter side of blue with Chief Joseph Spiess from Brentwood, ex-city major. Welcome,
Thank
Chief.
you, Daniel. Thank you.
Actually, I think
How are things in Brentwood?
They're wonderful. We have no crime and no problem.
Right.
Candyland.
Another you beat me to it.
that's because they do such a good job.
Thank
Exactly
you.
right.
Thank you, Jim.
That's
I
right.
think if I'm not sure Mary Michelle still watches it with the group, but every time Joe Spiess shows up, they have to do a shot.
All right. There we go.
All right.
But
There
Well,
we
and
go.
I'll repeat this because I said it with the Jerry Layshock thing too, is that
You're fine.
yeah, you can drink it. You can drink out of that. We're not getting sponsored yet.
You're
so
growing ass.
Joe.
But one of the things that I was telling the Romeos met today, and we all know the Romeos.
Ex-police.
The ex-police officers, retired old men out eating out. But anyway, I was telling them who we had on tonight or who was our guest, and one of them was Jerry Layshock, who we talked
Colonel
to.
Layshock.
Colonel Layshock, and the other one was Chief Spiess. And he said, he goes, those guys are like Joan Rivers to the Johnny Carson show. Anytime you guys get light on material, you just call them in.
I think you should find that offensive, Chief.
I think it's a compliment.
Absolutely, because
You got to work a little harder to offend me than that.
But what we called Joe and Jerry about was undercover work and how it's changed over the years and some of the stories. And Jerry tells great stories about his time as undercover. But I had the pleasure of working with Joe Spiess over the years and how that changed over to where guys were working undercover as policemen. And we got away from that because it was dangerous. And the technology helped out, and we'll get into it with Joe. But one of the things that has really changed, and Jerry's stories were great, you don't hear those stories anymore. And some of the federal agencies might do it still, to a degree. Joe, do you think they do? Or
There's one in particular that still does quite a bit of undercover work.
which one do you think that one is?
ATF.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, with guns and stuff like that, yeah, you can see that. But
Still just as dangerous, though, but
probably, yeah.
yeah.
Don't want to mess with those
When I
guys.
was the commander for narcotics not too long ago, for a short period of time, we were doing undercover buys.
Were you?
Yep, quite a bit actually.
Was that like a scat kind of thing, or were you trying to make it? What were you doing?
We would we'd have CIs that would introduce us, and they'd go under, but they had wires, and then
What were you buying?
we were buying heroin, whatever they had.
What was your reasoning behind that?
I inherited the unit, and that's what they were doing. They were doing already. Actually,
Right.
Mike Mueller was there before me, so they would do. They would get Kel set up and buy money and everything.
All right. But Joe, one of the things, just to give a little background, and then we're going to tell a couple undercover stories here too. And but Joe and I, as a lot of people know, are good friends. And Joe had, and you worked in our DEA. How long did you? What years did you work in DEA?
From 84 to 88.
So from 84 to 88, and you had one in particular, one that I always liked as a young, softball player at the time. I guess you had gotten out of baseball. We all got out of baseball and played softball, but we're all in good shape. And it's tough to go undercover when you look like a normal
Right.
person. I mean, that's just life.
A white boy CBC athlete.
Right. And
Yeah,
then,
and all of a sudden you're buying
and
dope.
you're how old at the time?
I was probably 24.
Go ahead with that story.
Well, I got assigned to DEA in 84, and it was still an environment that buying dope undercover was part of your mission. It was part of your job. So the very first time that I got information from an informant that was going to lead to what at the time was a 5 kilo deal, which was a lot of dope back in those days.
Absolutely.
Of cocaine.
Yep.
Just to give you a little perspective on that, the guy that was selling the dope wanted $50,000 per kilo.
Damn.
So the total price was $250,000.
Holy shit.
So
Yeah. What's up, Sacksmith Avenue?
I know that's expensive. That's expensive coke, isn't it?
well, I was laughing with listening to Jerry Leshock's stories about spending $60 on 4 buttons of heroin. At DEA, they didn't even blink an eye. We went to the safe and got $250,000 out, got it approved as flash money to do the deal. And I was the undercover guy because it was my information. And this was the first time I'd ever been undercover. And the unit at the time was being run by a DEA agent that had been around for a long time. Was getting ready to retire. So he came up with the idea to put me as the undercover guy in a DEA airplane with $250,000 and the bad guy to flash the money. That was, and then to get the deal to go. So that was my first introduction to
So you were a high roller.
Yeah, so I still laugh about it today, but I went into DEA. The deal, as they all did, got delayed. So I'm running around with $250,000 in the front seat of my undercover car by myself. I got no cover team, and I didn't have anything to do for a couple hours because it was delayed. So I went to my girlfriend's house, and I didn't leave the money in the car. So I took $250,000 she was living with her parents, and her father was a reverend, a minister. And I walked in and put $250,000 on the table, and I opened a bag to show it to them. They were like, what are you doing? That was my first.
You got to go up in a plane just to impress somebody?
Yeah, and we did. We went up in a plane, and it worked.
And it worked. And then one of the other things that, and then talking to you and Sam Simon and some of the other guys, is that they used to send you guys into like bars with flash money just to try to hook up with good dope dealers, correct?
Yeah, we often had prior information that somebody was in there that we were targeting. Though.
Okay.
But yeah, it was.
Then you go in and flash the money.
Yeah, the idea was to get in there and just use your personality to cuddle up to them and introduce yourself to them, and that worked too.
Well,
It worked
you must have really been undercover pretending
Right.
personality. No.
Yeah.
But we actually,
He had to have a personality, which is
hey.
I think under that plan, I would have done all right in DEA. They had dictionated that plan by the time I got there. You give me a couple $1,000s and let me loose in the bar, I think I can do some damage.
So you were like going to the dance clubs and stuff like that?
Yeah, depending. Some of them were downtown clubs. They knew they were selling, like, for example, at the time, ecstasy was flowing out of a lot of those clubs. So, but we would know if Danny was the guy, we would kind of know, and then we knew, we would kind of saddle up to the guy as best we could, and it would work. I mean, if you did it the right way, you'd flash a little money and just, have a few drinks with them, things like that. So.
But there was a particular one that you did undercover that kind of enlightened you that maybe there's a better way to do this. Talk about that one a little bit.
So I was at DEA in an interesting time because it was still street oriented. I was in a DEA task force, so I was a police officer assigned and had the power and arrest powers of a federal agent. And there was a group of us there, about 8 people, and there were agents assigned to the group as well. So it was kind of a mix of what I would call upper end drug investigations, and then lower end stuff that we would run up the flagpole, often in the same night, 2-3 times up the flag, with guys that decided to flip and cooperate. So we could basically do that drug law enforcement on pretty much could do whatever we wanted in terms of the breadth of an investigation.
Right.
So the one you're talking about, though, was, and I was a CBC kid, and I wasn't exposed to violence as a kid.
Right. 6'1", 180.
Yeah,
Not emaciated.
I would look like I was 24 and looked like I was 18.
had all his teethuses.
Right.
I remember, when I first time I'd lay eyes on him, he was a sergeant, and it was on the 4th floor, and I was getting off for whatever reason, and I didn't know him from Adam. He walks out, and he had stripes on. I'm like, holy shit. This is the youngest sergeant I've ever seen in my life. He looked like he was 12. I'm like, holy crap.
Well, I had an investigation that back in the day in '84, PCP was a big drug in North St. Louis, and it was the nastiest shit you ever ran into.
Dipping into more cigarettes.
Yeah, and he'd sell it in little bottles, or they'd sell the dip.
$10 a dip. Yeah.
So it was a prevalent problem in North St. Louis back then, and a lot of violence related to it. Not only violence amongst the drug dealers and the users, but toward police. I mean, there was many stories about these PCP
Oh,
people.
yeah.
They get
fighting.
strong and
Yeah.
Strong. Hercules.
Yeah.
So, when we were in DEA, those were the kind of cases that they liked because the mission then was to try and it is today as well, is to try and, do impactful cases on the neighborhoods. So I had information and it led up to a search warrant. Well, the idea was to send me up to the door. Well, at the time, JJ, you probably, and Danny, you'll know, all you guys saw these things. These were fortresses in North St. Louis with iron bars and usually, some version of selling the dope out the windows with ropes and all this other crap.
like The Wire.
Yeah. So that was my job on this particular case because it was my case. And I still remember, and I laughed when you asked Leshak, had you ever been scared undercover? It's like I'm sitting here today walking up to that dope house, and my mission was to go up and buy through the bars.
PCP.
Buy PCP.
Right.
Some, white bread kid from...
I don't know. Well, what lingo do I use?
Yeah. So, and I had no clue. And, I really didn't know the lingo.
Pardon
they didn't
me.
ask me.
I was wondering if it wouldn't be too much trouble. Would,
I'm from CBC.
could you
and I
spare
heard this
a
is-
little bit of, those dips, the more cigarettes
Can
that
I get
dip
some
into
water,
there?
please?
$10
I will
some water.
say, we were working
Thank you.
with...
I'll wait here.
we were working with the city narcotics unit on that at the time. And so I had typed up a federal search warrant for the house, but they were hitting the house. But they had done this multiple times, and it was an awesome event to watch. They pulled up 2 tow trucks, and 2 coppers run up to the door and hook onto the iron
Bam.
and pull the tow trucks
yeah.
off. And pull. I was
Been
like,
there, done that
again,
one.
Right.
I've never seen this act. Right?
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
wow.
Well, then I remember that. I was actually, when you were telling the story about the houses being fortified with those things, I can remember being at one where they did the same thing. And they hooked the cables to the doors, and all the bars were going to get ripped off. And the coppers were right, they get on each side of the door to where when that door gets ripped off, they're not going to get hurt.
Right.
And so the tow truck pulls off, and that door comes flying off. Well, that door takes out 2 of the pillars holding up the porch.
I was with you that night. Do you remember what else had happened? It came flying out of the front yard like this.
Oh, it was
And
a
it hit a Cadillac and a VW and drove them into each other. And the guy just kept driving.
right. I was just like,
Yeah, that one did.
I was like, dude,
That was
That's all you
that was
can do.
poor planning, not talking to the tow
Dude.
truck driver. Better.
Well, those doors were so efficient that most of the time the bricks would give out
Yeah.
before the door would.
Yeah.
So you'd rip half the wall out
Yeah.
when you pulled the door off.
So I think one of the things I want to get into too, Joe, is that as technology changed, and you had a strong philosophy of officers being safe, and you took a early on opinion that we don't need to be doing undercover work. So get into that a little bit and your ideology behind that.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the result of being changing the way we did business was the stupid things that I had done and the things that should have gotten me hurt.
All of us.
And that goes for all of us.
Yeah.
But I think what I realized in terms of undercover work was there was no reason to put a police officer in these positions. The confidential informants, the people that had the information, easily could go into these roles. The reason we didn't do it typically early on in my career was the federal prosecutors or state prosecutors, they wanted a police officer to be the prosecutor's witness.
To be the witness.
Yeah. I just didn't buy into that. I just didn't, to me, I would rather have an informant make a buy and then we type a search warrant, drop the buy, don't even use it, and use the warrant. There were ways to manipulate a case so that you didn't even have to use the buy.
Right.
It may be probable cause for a warrant.
Take a little extra time.
Yes.
Right.
So yes, and it would take a little extra effort, a little extra time, but to take a police officer into those environments. I mean, I can tell you multiple studies. I doing an undercover deal in the back of a van with a guy, and he literally pulls a pistol out and puts it at my chest during the 2 kilo by bust. Makes you realize this is a really stupid position to put a police officer in.
Right.
And that happened to me at DEA, and I actually thanked the guy afterwards because the DEA agents that stormed the van that he and I were sitting in while I'm buying the dope, and he put the gun down, and he told me, He goes, once I figured out you were a police officer, I wasn't going to kill you.
That's yeah.
But he thought he was getting
Was that
robbed.
D? Was that D?
No, this was a different guy. And it was in Jennings. But the guy said, hey, I thought I was getting robbed. And he pulled the gun out. But I had multiple times of that in my career, and that's what drove me to that conclusion.
Well, that's a good point, though, Chief, because there was times where we would go in front of a judge, even after hours, and we would get a John Doe search warrant, and the CI would raise his right hand in front of the judge, and that would be good enough for a search warrant.
Right.
So why wouldn't that be good enough for testimony?
Right.
Well, with the change of technology,
That became the norm then. Bringing the CI became the norm.
Yeah.
But some of the stories that Jerry Leshock tells were before the technology came through. The mid '80s.
Right.
When you had when Joe was starting to make his got his opinion on this, and is now we have Kells, so we can hear what's said, right? And then video. We were all terrible at videos. I've never seen, and that's why we always had every group had a tech guy. Because there was one guy that could work a camera. The rest of them had no clue what to do.
Hey,
Producer
Tommy,
John.
explain to what a Kell is to people who don't know.
I don't know what it exactly stands for, but it was
A wire.
it was
a
a
wire.
wire, and you would put it on the undercover policeman at times or the informant, and you could hear from how close, maybe a block or two,
Yeah.
a block or two, and you could hear what they were saying, and you could record that. And then those things came along. Then we became more proficient with video. And now it wasn't as easy for defense attorneys to kill these the informants are always going to have a bad record. Nobody just comes knocking on the door and go, yeah, I'm completely clean. I want to break up a big drug.
Yeah.
There's ways to augment that too, Tommy. I mean, just as an example, telephone calls between the informant and the bad guys. If you tape those calls and you record and put them into evidence, it's really hard to refute.
Right.
6 months later in a trial that wasn't you on the video.
Right.
So and it was some basic things that we weren't doing very well.
But just like any time you change, because the guys that are doing undercover work, they think that's the greatest shit in the world. And when you make that change, like, we're being a bunch of pussies out here. We're doing this, we're doing that. No, we're not. We're just trying to let you go home, right?
Well, you remember in the 90s, we were the homicide city of the world, and it was crack driven. And SCAT hit us, a street corner apprehension team. That was all undercover work. We had women and men and St. Louis police officers in positions all over the city that were buying 2 rocks of crack in some of the most violent, dangerous neighborhoods. I mean, we had 300 murders at one year in the early 90s. And we were putting officers into that environment, and they
Two
could
rocks, like you said.
Yeah, and they could come in there and tell you story after story of absolute violence, of shootings, and undercovers getting beaten. Pernell Witherspoon, I still remember.
That's Mikey Mueller. He was in SCAT.
Mueller was another one. So when you start looking at the cases and you witness these violent acts, and for me, I had lived through some of these things. Yeah, you change your mentality and you try to morph into something that's safer for the officers.
Right. And then because when you became the lieutenant of Vice Narcotics and MVOP, what all we were doing back in the day, and that was one of your biggest things was safety. I mean, if you walked out of there without being identified, he said, you better have police on you. If I see you outside of a car, you better have police written on or some kind of garb that says police. Well, and I say that because that was his whole mentality of everything that he thought about was how can we make this safer? Because we just talked about SCAT, and SCAT had a tremendous record of success. I'm not saying they didn't do anything bad, but that was dangerous. That was about as dangerous as you can get. And
Before Chief Spiess retired from the police department as a major, the reason we have Tahoes as police vehicles right now is because of him.
Right.
He felt that they were safer, bigger vehicles, and that's when you look at him, you think safety and
right. And that's what in talking to him over the years, that's always was the number one thing on his mind was. And then he flat told me, he says, the last thing I want to do is talk to somebody's widow.
Right.
yeah.
That's not my goal as being a supervisor. And he did everything he could to do that. And by the way, but anyway, one of the operations that Joe that we are all familiar with, and it was after we had gotten away from doing undercover work, and we're no policemen are doing undercover work or very little. But then ATF came to town and did a undercover operation that actually was very successful. It was called Operation Gideon. You remember that?
I do.
And just explain what they did and how they did it and stuff like that.
Well, the focus was on weapons, and they were setting up storefronts that were supposed to be kind of like pawn shops that would purchase weapons from bad guys. And if they were convicted felons, they would have a problem. If they were selling stolen guns, they would have a problem. And then some of these sales happened on the street through informants. They actually had ATF agents imported from around the country that
Right.
came in, and that's all they did was undercover.
They were doing that
It
from
was
city
kind of
to
like
city.
Jerry Layshock did in the early '80s in the city. That's all they did was undercover work. That was their job. So, yeah, they brought them all in, and they arrested a lot of our bad guys.
Right.
But it was extremely dangerous.
Well, one of them got shot at, I know.
Yeah, they had several.
And one of them, I met one of them at Leo's place after work one day, midnight or whatever. We ran into each other. And he's looking, and Leo introduces to me, and he says, "This guy, he's working with us." And Leo was in intelligence at the time, so he's working with those guys in the Operation Gideon thing. He's got to identify people. So I was talking to the guy, and I was like, "Hey, what do you think of St. Louis?" He goes, "Hey, man." He goes, "Your people." He goes, "They're way different than the rest of the country, and they're way more violent." He goes, "These guys are for real." And I was just like, "Wow." That's the first time I had heard it from.
Did you feel a bit of pride there?
Right. And with this guy, though, this Operation Gideon went from, when I looked it up, because I knew I was going to try to talk about it tonight, but when I looked it up, they had a 70-person arrest, or 70 people got arrested in Arizona, 80 people got arrested in Las Vegas. They just kept on going and going, and these guys. And one of the other things they had was not only it was a tattoo parlor / pawn shop. So they got just about every person you could coming through there, and they'd ask them, and then they would bring the stolen guns and all this other stuff, and they would identify. And Leo would be the guy Leo and Dan Early would be the guys that would. They didn't know all these guys. These guys were from out of town. These guys were just undercover. Well, Dan and Leo would identify these guys, and one of the things that they would do too is it's almost like entrapment, but they would allow but they got around it by allowing them to get out of it. But anyway, what they would say is that like an agent would get a guy that he knew was in the game or violent a little bit. So this guy owes me some money for a drug deal we did. He's not giving me the money. I know he's got the money, but he's just not giving me the money. He goes, "I need to get my goddamn money." And he would say this as people were pawning stuff or getting tattoos, or he'd pick out the right guys, and then some people would, I don't know, good luck getting the money back. Some people would bite. And they'd say, "All right, yeah, I got people who'll go get that money back." And then he was saying, "All I want's my money, and this is the exact amount of money I want. Whatever else you get, dope, whatever extra money you get, you can have it." So they would have several meetings, and then like the last couple meetings, they would say, "Hey, you don't want to do this," so they give them a way out. "If you don't want to do this, we're good. I'm not, no big deal. I'll find somebody else." And that's when the one guy was telling me, he goes, "We never had anybody try to back out."
In St. Louis.
They
In St.
were in.
Louis, they're
Right.
like-
He goes, "They were in.
Yeah,
They were in from the get-go."
Yeah.
And what I found interesting about that is that was in like 2012. I was working with Joe in 2003 when we were like, we're not working no more, but undercover stuff,
shit.
right?
Yeah.
So it was a little different. And
Hey, Joe, how much difference is it now? How important is human intelligence compared to like what you can do electronically now and through the internet? How much do policemen really need to be involved in these drug deals?
It's an interesting question. I'll give you an example, though. DEA morphed from buying dope on the street, doing search warrants, to mainly doing wiretap cases. So that piece of the electronic surveillance stuff in that world really was a game changer, especially on the federal level. But today, I mean, I think what you're asking is, a lot of the detective work can be done sitting at your desk on the internet. I can't tell you how many cases, not even drug cases, but robberies, carjacking cases like that are being solved through social media exploration and things like that. So there's a lot of things available out there to give these guys away that we never had when we were doing that job. It was really, Leshock said it earlier, it was really driven by how good your informants were. You were that good based on how good your informants were.
Yeah.
But that was a self-prophesying thing too, because the more arrests you made, the more you generated informants.
Yeah.
So that, people that recognized it and understood it in the dope game, the police officers, they were the elite investigators because they had informants.
So let's talk a little bit about informants, though. Is that some informants can be an absolute hassle. I mean, because when you start paying them money, and they'll call you at 3 a.m. They'll call you at in the middle of a graduation, and they want shit, because they're used to, if I give them good information, I'm going to get some money back. And Leo was really good, and so many officers were really good at dealing with informants. But some of the stuff that they had to deal with, and we've talked about, Water 3, 245. And the reason we called him that is because we wouldn't respond to his heroin calls all the time, and then he would always add that they got 245s. We called them Quarter 3.
When the gun, you talk about a gun, they always
right. Talk about a gun. Okay, they might come quicker. But anyway, to go on to, but these informants were to be, and like you said, informants run dope. I mean, they are. If you don't have good informants, you're not going to be good at the dope game. But they are treacherous to deal with.
You know what though? But Quarter 3, Joe took a liking to him, and you know why?
Because he was right.
No, because when Bob Stanzi was killed, he called Joe and told him, "I'm sorry to hear about that."
Yeah.
Hey, they got hearts too.
Yeah. He was a nice guy. I dealt with him too. And one of the funniest things is when some guys stopped him, and I was a sergeant. And they stopped, and they had some guys sitting on the curb on a parking lot right off of West Florissant. And I got out of the car, see what was going on, and Quarter 3 was sitting on the curb too. And he kept looking. Kept trying to make eye contact. When he makes eye contact, he kept pointing his head, tilting his head like,
I want to snitch.
Hey, it's not me.
Right. Slip snitch. He's a head nod snitch.
Well, I started laughing. I'm gonna start laughing. I did. I kind of turned around. And I grabbed one of the officers and I said, "Hey, the guy on the curb he keeps head pointing to the guy. I think it's dirty, so you might want to check him out." But that was Quarter 3.
Was he right?
He was right.
Quarter 3 was on the money.
3. Yeah.
It's just that he had. I mean, he'd call us at fucking.
Yeah, he was. Oh, you know what? He would call you, and then he'd go down the line to who was.
Yeah,
talking to him.
he had 3 or 4 guys, and if you didn't respond to it, he called somebody else, and he called somebody else. He just needs some money.
One of my favorite informants when I was at DEA, when you're on duty, when you were assigned to DEA, you would get a week's worth of duty. So,
duty agent. Well, you have to answer the phone.
Yeah, you have to answer the phone. So I answered the phone. Some guy in a penitentiary started stalking me out of Texas. He ended up being one of the best informants I ever had, and he never left the penitentiary.
Really?
He was doing deals out of the penitentiary, and but he was that guy because he would call you at 3 o'clock.
What was his motivation, though?
He was trying to get out of jail.
I mean,
and we did actually help him get out of jail. I mean, he flipped. He introduced me to some Hispanic guys out of L.A. And on Christmas Eve, on a couple months out, I was working undercover on the phone with these guys, and they showed up with a bunch of kilos on the train in St. Louis. And that guy that was snitching out of the penitentiary set up the entire thing. He was and everything was recorded. And,
wow.
Yeah.
So he did. You did help.
But he
himself.
was that guy. He was paying
Right. He out. He got out.
You got out though.
Good.
You got to make it work for you. If you're going to be an informant, you got to make it work for you some way.
Yeah.
We had an informant. Just quick funny story. We had an informant in DEA. It wasn't my informant, but one of the other TFOs had a tremendous, a star informant. If we were running low on shit to do, call Bobby, or I have to scratch that out.
No, you don't.
When you call him,
Ton of Bobby.
and he'd set something up for you. And I had never met Bobby, but we're working cases that Bobby had set up forever. Well, anytime you got to go pay somebody, you need to have two people. And his TFO guy, that was his handler, said, "Hey, I need to go pay the guy." I said, "Can you ride with me?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'll ride with you." Now I've known that Bobby has been paid an astronomical amount of money over the years. We're always flipping out several thousand to Bobby because he was making those kind of cases. Then we pull up, and Bobby jumps into our back seat, and Bobby had the body odor that it was just unbelievable. What? And
That's Bobby odor.
And now he wants to bullshit with him and his.
John Frank.
John Frank. You missed that, John.
No, he didn't. No,
he
he
gave a
gave
thumbs up.
And then, so, and Bobby's, and then now him and the TFO are starting to converse. Well, this stink is not. It's not It's not a conversible stink. You got to get this guy out of the car.
Stink.
Or yeah,
Your car's going to be messed up.
Well, it kept on going, and now I'm like hyperventilating. So I said, "Hey, Bobby," I said, "How much money do you think we paid you over the years?" And it had several $100,000.
Yeah.
Easy. And I go, "You think you can work in a bar of soap?" Just real quick. Just work in a bar of soap, goddamn me.
Run by that shower right quick.
But he was, I've never seen anybody better than that guy. That guy made his handler a superstar.
Yeah. That's all it takes.
And then we had, unfortunately, it was one of those cases where he finally had to testify. That wasn't good.
Okay. Yeah.
But
I got you. There's also those times when you have those horrible informants that are just absolutely send you on wild goose chases, and
They're praying.
they always find the right
Never
officer.
right.
Praying and praying.
Yeah.
They always find the right officer that'll do their shit.
oh yeah.
Wildly kicking doors or some.
I was
And my motto always was, "He who snitches for you will snitch against you."
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because they'll make up shit about you if you don't
100%.
do them right. So I didn't like informants too much.
No, but I think that having Joe on will really sets up that what Jerry was talking about earlier when we were talking to him.
The transition.
And then, but Jerry was before the transition, and the stories were great.
Yeah.
They were fun, and but then as Jerry was talking, he even referenced to Joe saying things have changed because of safety issues, and obviously with the technology and everything that we've talked about.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
That's going to be a great interview too. Yep. So, Tommy, what do you think?
What else you got, Joe? You got anything going on in Brentwood we need to know about?
No, it's all
Candyland?
good. Candyland is good.
He's got it locked down.
Now, are you working in conjunction with the other Candyland with Sunset Hills?
Sunset Hills.
We do.
You guys got anything going on?
The biggest blessing we've got, we just hired 2 more people in Brentwood, 2 more police officers.
Probably city.
Where'd they come from, Joe?
Probably city.
Where did they come from?
We are not, I want to be crystal clear on this podcast. We are not soliciting or,
But you can't help who applies.
I can't help who applies, and I can't help who gets a $10,000, $15,000 raise.
Oh hell
Boom.
no!
You know what? I'm glad it was said. It needs to be said.
Oh, that was the
Well,
old
the city of
has to be
St.
said.
Louis would pay their police officers a
think,
fair rate. They
we
wouldn't
got-
be
we have
losing them.
We have a
new
new
governor.
mayor. Things
New
are-
mayor.
new governor, new mayor, new
I've said enough.
leadership.
Hey,
Things are coming.
Joe, be ready because a couple of them are coming back.
Yeah, they're coming back.
Love it.
I'm not coming back.
No, some of your young officers are though.
I would come back if you asked me, but
Hey,
I'm not.
yeah, he might be cheap. But one of the guys, first time somebody comes back from Brentwood or Sunset Hills, we're having him on the show, brother.
Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah.
That's your
can't wait.
that's your
That's my
marketing tool
goal.
right there.
That's my goal.
Say if anybody comes back, we got him on the show.
Straight to
Full
the
hour.
show.
Put the
Full
challenge
hour.
out there, JJ.
You better hurry up. We're up to about 16 in the last.
All right, settle down over there.
Okay,
All
let's
right.
get Joe off the
Chief.
stage.
Thanks again. We'll see you
bro.
soon.
Good job, Joe.
All right, Joseph. Always a pleasure.
Give me some pizza.
Which one's got on?